Heute!
Diane, 11:30 a.m., February 24th. Entering the town of Twin Peaks.
Dale Cooper is a special agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned to the town of Twin Peaks. Cooper's deft mixture of ratiocination, intuition, and openness to mystical practices lead him and the sheriff's department to the root of the town's horrific supernatural serial killer. Cooper rolls into town in the pilot episode and swiftly, decisively takes command of the investigation into Laura Palmer's murder. Twin Peaks has a timelessness about it, as many viewers have remarked, and Dale is no exception to that. He seems like a character from the newsreels of the 1940s. Cooper has heavily slicked back, shoe-polished up hair and wears a nice suit everywhere he goes. 2 years before Silence of the Lambs made FBI agents fashionable again, Agent Cooper was already there. An old-fashioned G-man, ready to talk tough, think fast, and act with the purity of Elliot Ness's Untouchables. Cooper speaks with sharp confidence, projecting authority easily. Unlike other shows and movies which play off the rivalry between federal and local law enforcement, Twin Peaks wisely shows them working together from the off.
When the Bureau gets called in, the Bureau's in charge. And you're going to be working for me. Sometimes local law enforcement has a problem with that. I hope you understand.
Well, like I said, we're glad to have you here.
Cooper takes charge of the sheriff's department, and he's immediately recognized as the leader. They all look up to him as the more experienced lawman, and he treats them with kindness and respect in turn. Cooper begins to develop a bond with everyone and treats the sheriff's station as his new home. He helps Andy with his love problems, or tries to anyway, remarks on how good Hawk is at tracking, trains all of them in a more sophisticated form of detection, interrogation, and policing, and even starts to teach them some rather unique methods of searching outside of standard guidelines. The policemen are a bit skeptical about Tibet and dream analysis, but they're willing to go along with Coop and dutifully help him. Cooper's incredible traditional deductive abilities afford him some breathing room to use unorthodox methods. And those methods pay off spectacularly in the first season as Cooper leads everyone closer and closer to the truth. Agent Cooper also begins to develop the greatest bromance of all time with Sheriff Harry S. Truman. They fit together, as Harry says, like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. Unlike Agent Scully, for instance, on The X-Files, who battled Mulder and tore down his ideas, Harry is almost universally supportive, standing in quiet, reflective awe. Truman is there to listen and follow Dale, no matter the strangeness of his beliefs. Dale is on the path, and Harry is right alongside him to help him out. During the show, they develop a strong friendship based on mutual trust and affection. They work together beautifully. I'm not usually the kind of person who sees homosexual subtext in works of fiction. Most of the time I think it's a ridiculous conceit on part of the critic to shoehorn in their own particular interest and orientation onto places they don't reasonably exist. However, there's more than a little spark of attraction between Cooper and Harry, I think. Maybe I'm off base here, but they both seem to really like each other. Like they really like each other.
That's why I figure you're going to be needing this.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, when those steelhead are running upstream, they are only thinking about one thing: sex. A green butt skunk breaks their concentration.
A green butt skunk.
Harry, I don't know what to say.
Just kiss your fruitcakes!
It's one of the absolute best friendships ever shown on TV. The two are mutually respectful and like being in each other's company. They just sort of fall right into working together perfectly, each following the other's lead. Conversation flows easily, and Agent Cooper instantly bonds and enjoys being around Harry, like they were meant to be together their whole life. In the first season, Harry becomes embroiled with a dispute with an FBI agent. Rather than support the FBI man he's known for years, Cooper immediately and passionately supports his friend Harry, who he's only known for a few days. It's the kind of perfect friendship I think we'd all like to have in our lives. The local cops fall in line behind the feds with no fuss. Much of the time, Cooper behaves achingly correct and upright. Formal stiffness and distance rule Coop's roost with most interactions. But he balances that perfectly with occasional outbursts of childish wonder. He makes adorable little asides about things he likes. The filter of joy about the world is gone for him. Cooper is simply delighted by the beauty of nature, overawed by wildlife, fishing, birds, and the trees above all set his soul on fire.
Sheriff, what kind of fantastic trees have you got growing around here? Big, majestic.
Douglas firs.
Douglas firs.
We get the impression that Cooper has lived much or all of his life in the big city, especially Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. Unable to be in nature's embrace for so long, he's joyous when wandering around the thick woodlands of Twin Peaks. Sprinkling in those little moments of happiness make Dale Cooper one of the most likable characters on TV. Towards the end of the show, he enters into a relationship with a young woman named Annie Blackburn, who recently left a convent. He says of her,
I feel constantly amazed, stunned. Music and people, the way they talk and laugh, and the way some of them are so clearly in love. It's like a foreign language to me. I know just enough of the words to realize how little I understand.
Man, I would love to see the world through your eyes. There's some things I might do different if I had the chance.
but in his own way he sees the world with a childlike glint of wonder. They both, despite their disparate troubles in life and love, can look at the world with purity and the simple joy of looking at plants and animals with happiness. Cooper is, quite simply, one of the most brilliant detectives in the history of fiction. He is the heir of Sherlock Holmes, but brilliantly the writers make him totally unique. Though logic, reason, and deduction are second nature to Cooper, he is also something of a mystic. Cooper is completely in tune or in touch with some sort of otherworldly or spiritual side of himself. Cooper can instantly penetrate almost telepathically through lies, subterfuge, and deceit.
So, Harry, how long have you been seeing her?
How did you know?
Body language?
Jeez Louise.
Every secret is picked apart almost instantly by Cooper. Nothing, no matter how unusual, can stay hidden from him for long. Cooper's rationality is extraordinary, but he also belongs to a long line of occult detectives, a subset of detective fiction dating back almost to the founding of the genre well over 100 years ago. The occult detective mixes in atmosphere, themes, and most importantly, investigative methods linked to the supernatural. Also in the 1990s, another occult detective, Fox Mulder of The X-Files, achieved equal fame following in Cooper's footsteps. The occult detective genre has found renewed popularity in the past 15 years, thanks in part to anime, which offers a plethora of magical gumshoes. The most popular being Death Note, which follows a similar theme of an almost preternaturally skilled Flatfoot, who is tasked with discovering a villain perfectly disguised by magic. Cooper is set up by the Bureau to find out who killed Laura Palmer, a task that he throws himself wholeheartedly into from the pilot onwards. Dale uses some unusual techniques to try and unravel this mystery, such as throwing a stone at a glass bottle and recording if the glass broke. Some things he calls Tibetan technique. Probably the most important moment of TV history in the past 30 years occurred on April 19, 1990. Early on in the series, Cooper has a bizarre dream. Within that dream, artiness, abstract meaning, and the unconscious had full reign for about 10 minutes. It expanded the minds of a generation of young TV writers and producers and helped establish the television as the equal of film in terms of visual artistry. Within the dream was a riddle.
Our job is simple. Break the code, solve the crime.
Dream analysis was one of the things he was willing to pursue as a method of investigation. The strange dream cast some sort of spell over the entire show, a pall of weirdness that hung over everything that was done in the tiny Washington town. Cooper exhibited all outward signs of moral rectitude and rigid focus on logic. Yet to solve the crime, he knew early on he had to let go of the rational and focus on the mysterious and bizarre. Through the first season, Cooper dutifully looks into all of the aspects of the case. He uses every method of discovery imaginable, from forensic analysis to deduction through intuition and hunches onto just pure luck, easily unraveling town mysteries, adultery, hidden relationships, drug use, sex, and every dirty little thing a small town likes to keep hidden. After episode 7, he has pieced together what happened on Laura's last night alive, discovered her troubles with drugs and sex, and pierced a number of criminal schemes throughout the town. At the start of the second season, Cooper is ready to follow the rocky and unusual road to find Laura's killer. Cooper's time at the FBI began several years before the pilot episode. He was a bright young star in the Bureau with great things ahead of him when he was paired with senior agent Wyndham Earle. Earle was an equally brilliant detective who taught Dale everything about being a federal agent. Earle's mind is...
Harry, Wyndham Earle's mind is like a diamond. It's cold and hard and brilliant.
Dale imbibed much about deduction and investigation from Earle, but the partnership ended in tragedy. Dale's mentor began to fall further and further into utter madness and criminality. He seemed to thirst for power and mystical strength from the dark forces of the Black Lodge and committed a serious crime. During this time, Dale met Earle's wife, Carolyn.
She was a very beautiful, very gentle woman. Her name was Carolyn. She and I fell in love.
They fell in love and began an affair. This is one of the few moments we see some passion from the orderly Agent Cooper. He was madly in love with her. He sent love poems to her. She was the love of his life, and she died in his arms, murdered at the hands of his former partner, Wyndham Earle. Her death marked Agent Cooper for years. It was only after the show began that he began to change and opened himself up to more new experiences. Dale's relationship with women on the show was incredibly formal and upright. His initial love interest is the 18-year-old Audrey Horne. Their early interactions are suggestive, to say the least.
Audrey, that rightward slant in your handwriting indicates a romantic nature. A heart that yearns. Be careful.
I do.
Audrey, played by Sherilyn Fenn, is one of the most beautiful characters in TV history. She's also coquettish and aggressively flirts with Cooper for several episodes, once even appearing naked in his bed, offering herself to him right then and there. Cooper is clearly affected by her charms, you'd have to be dead not to, but maintains that Eliot Ness-like ability to resist all temptation. But it adds to Cooper's humanity that he is tempted by her even if he rejects her. Fans have speculated for years that the two were supposed to hook up at some point, but opposition arose because the character was so young. It wouldn't be seemly for an adult to start sleeping around with a high school student. During his time with Audrey, we get the impression he hasn't had any sexual relationships in a long while. The death of the woman he described as the love of his life made him retreat into his work, but the beauty and magic of Twin Peaks began to melt his heart.
Diane, at this particular juncture, I would like to make specific mention of Annie Blackburn. She is a completely original human being. Her responses as pure as those of a child. I must be honest, I haven't felt this way about a woman since Carolyn. It has taken meeting Annie for me to realize how gray my life has been since Carolyn's death. How cold, solitary.
Could his extraordinary investigative skills be enhanced because of his prolonged lack of romantic attachment? So he's rigidly, absolutely laser-like focused on his job? He seems to adopt the mannerisms of a time gone by and wants to keep everything strictly regulated and controlled. Just like most people were supposed to not express their feelings back in the 1940s and 50s. Cooper seems to have withdrawn from his sexual feelings and pushed them deep down. When he was shot and lay dying in episode 8, he looks back on his life and reflects on what he's missed out on in life, and something he wants most of all is...
Time like this, curiously, you begin to think of the things you regret, or the things you might miss. I would very much like to make love to a beautiful woman who I had genuine affection for.
He and Audrey become good friends after their flirtation concludes. I felt this was a mistake for the show. It would have made for interesting television to see the ultimate puritanical federal agent giving in to improper longing for a high school girl. That was an amazing plot path they could have gone down. Cooper was totally upright all the time, and as Audrey Horne says,
Yeah, there's only one problem with you. You're perfect.
Dale is too damn perfect. That's not exactly a flaw in the writing, I think it's a flaw in his character. Cooper's great nemesis on the show is the Killer Bob, a deranged spirit creature beyond the understanding of mankind. He is also, to put it in Dungeons & Dragons terms, chaotic evil. Bob is a force of nature like a rampaging wolf or a raging tornado. He is a parasitical beast who obeys only his appetite. Agent Cooper is clearly lawful good, a paladin who does everything by the book and tries never to succumb to his baser desires. The dichotomy is similar to the one between Batman and the Joker or the Vorlons and the Shadows in Babylon 5. One is a symbol of universal order, the other of total chaos. Also, I should mention that on several occasions, Dale clearly breaks the law in pursuit of a higher goal. In the first season, Cooper is taken to the bookhouse for the first time and sees Bernard Renault tied up in a chair guarded by civilians. This is clearly a violation of the law to treat a suspect that way. Cooper also learns Ed Hurley is a non-official deputy being used for stakeouts and so forth. Cooper's pretty happy to break the law in those cases, as long as it's for the greater good. In the first half of the second season, Dale leads a rescue team across national borders to retrieve Audrey Horne from One-Eyed Jacks. This event is clearly illegal, like majorly illegal, and yet when speaking to Gordon Cole, he says,
Now, Coop, is any of this true? Double homicide? Stolen drugs? Storming a whorehouse?
It's all a bunch of hogwash.
and yet that is what happened. He did storm a whorehouse, and multiple people were killed in the process, including a man being stabbed in the back by an off-duty sheriff's deputy. This sequence was great, but definitely out of character for the law and order-obsessed Cooper. He perhaps let his personal feelings for Audrey get in the way of his respect for the law. But Dale is far from a robot. He has feelings, thoughts, and drives that he follows. Perhaps the most obvious is caffeine. Dale is absolutely addicted to coffee, and I mean addicted.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. Harry, let's get one thing straight. I work for you now. You say drink coffee, I'll drink coffee. Rough sleep. I dreamt I was eating a large, tasteless gumdrop. I awoke to realize I was aggressively munching on one of my air pillow silicone earplugs. Hence the tastelessness. Perhaps I should keep a closer eye on my after-dinner coffee consumption.
He never seems to stop drinking it. From sunup until well after dinner, he downs coffee again and again. I don't know how he manages to fall asleep at night. I personally began drinking coffee many years ago in adolescence because of Cooper's obsession with it, and now I too am addicted. Cooper harshly comes down on people who do illegal drugs like cocaine, but as a fellow agent, Sam Stanley says, caffeine and nicotine are drugs. Coffee, I should point out, is also a stimulant, a mild stimulant compared to cocaine, of course, but still a drug that jolts you up and makes you more alert. So even scrupulously lawful Agent Cooper needs an electric kick of stimulation to get through the day, and he needs a lot of it. Just not as much as someone like Laura Palmer did. And even the unflappable Agent Cooper can lose his cool from time to time, betray his feelings. One of the best moments of the first season is when Cooper is undercover and speaking to Jacques Renault. Jacques is a morbidly obese, stupid, drug-dealing, teenager-pimping criminal, and Agent Cooper's disgust is on full display when he hears Jacques talking about sex with Laura.
He's doing a number on her. But Laura, she's screaming about the damn bird. So Leo takes out a chip, puts it in her mouth, and says, "Bite the bullet, baby. Bite the bullet."
Thanks for clearing that up.
Dale's dexterous ability to maintain perfect logic while necessarily stepping into mysticism when it's required is originally successful when up against Bob. Cooper's invisible opponent seems like an impossible villain to nab, but Cooper manages it. In the first half of the second season, Dale is slowly piecing together the truth of Bob. He learns that he is some sort of inhabiting ghost or spirit, that he can possess people, that he's utterly bestial and eats pain, suffering, sex, and violence. He is a living manifestation of rampant emotionalism, all the subconscious lizard brain drives and pulsing emotions lurking underneath the facade of society. Perhaps his interest in Buddhist religious doctrine and meditation is in part a means to control and suppress those base carnal aspects of himself, to keep the lower things from rising out of him. Cooper is obsessed with the East Asian country of Tibet. David Lynch originally became interested in the Buddhist nation in the late 80s when much of America did, and they began to wake up to the troubles in Tibet thanks to the Dalai Lama speaking out. Agent Cooper thinks of Tibet as an almost magical land of enlightenment and happiness.
Buddhist tradition first came to the land of snow in the 5th century A.D. The first Tibetan king to be touched by the Dharma was King Hathatha Rignon Butsan. He and succeeding kings were collectively known as the Happy Generations. Now, some historians place them in a water snake year, 213 A.D. Others in the year of a water ox, 173 A.D. Amazing, isn't it? The Happy Generations.
Where peaceful, happy souls live in contentment with an understanding of the Dharma. He desperately wishes to visit Tibet someday. Cooper is almost certainly a spiritual person. He gives Leland Palmer a sort of mystical send-off, sending him on the path and speaking some religious or metaphysical lines. Specifically about seeing a bright light, traditionally what one sees after you die and go to the afterlife. They don't go into exactly what religion, if any, he is, but I suspect it's at least influenced by Buddhist teaching and may involve meditation, which Cooper practices frequently, just as David Lynch is also a practitioner of transcendental meditation. Without that spiritual side, Cooper would probably be unable to battle the spiritual forces of the Black Lodge. Dale also just seems to be in tune with some mysterious force of the universe. He was able, like Major Briggs and the Log Lady, to receive the strange, incomprehensible messages sent from the Black Lodge. Cooper had strange visions, waking dreams where he heard or saw things that weren't there. Dale was a great transition point for the modern man that was being invented at that time. Just as Captain Picard was a very different sort of sensitive, thoughtful captain in the new Star Trek of the 80s, so too was Agent Cooper a new sort of lawman. He wasn't crass, boorish, or simplistic. Dale is intelligent, sensitive, very much in touch with his feelings in a literal sense. He's so in touch that he can sense vibrations from the world around him and learn things because of it. Dale can be tough and serious, but sometimes he's joyful and fun. A very new, modern sort of guy who is willing to be emotional, unguarded, and intellectual, unlike the grim, serious, working-class Joe Fridays of the past. The second half of Season 2 sees a brief interlude in Agent Cooper's and the show's storyline. He is briefly detained by the Bureau for his misdeeds. As much as I love Cooper, realistically he did break the law seriously multiple times. Cooper seems to have been through such a powerful experience he doesn't care about his possible incarceration. He seems to have further embraced the vaguely Eastern philosophy notion of allowing the world to happen around him and bend its actions rather than struggle against it.
Doing a lot of thinking lately. And I've started to focus out beyond the edge of the board. At a bigger game.
What game?
The sound wind makes through the pines. The sentience of animals. What we fear in the dark and what lies beyond the darkness.
Although that's really more Taoism than Buddhism. Cooper also seems to be thinking of buying a house in Twin Peaks and settling down there. The magic of the town has taken hold of him and he wants to make it a permanent part of himself. I would love to live in Twin Peaks if I got the chance. Who wouldn't? Unexpectedly, Agent Cooper is suspended from his job for several episodes. Sheriff Truman immediately deputizes him, however, and he continues his role on the show. There's really no change except in a technical sense about who is in charge. Cooper still calls the shots and Harry follows his lead. It's weird seeing Cooper outside of his trademark suit for several episodes, though he does look good in his 90s chic flannel clothes. While Jean Renault is dealt with in the foreground for multiple episodes, in the background Cooper learns yet more about the terrors of the seemingly idyllic small town. The main plot of the series, Laura Palmer's death, was closed, but Agent Cooper doesn't cease his investigations. Quickly it becomes apparent that the strange forces surrounding Laura's death are far from gone. They still exist somewhere out there in the woods. This was another major mistake that Dale made when he seemed to conclusively and decisively say to Sarah Palmer that Ba was gone forever, when that was clearly false. I don't know if he was trying to humor her or if he really believed it, but whatever it wasn't a good moment for Cooper. Dale begins a very dangerous process of learning more about mythological zones called the White and Black Lodges, a potential origin point for the dark creatures. Through increasingly mystical means, Cooper gets closer and closer to the ultimate secrets of Twin Peaks. Cooper also has to start dealing with some baggage from his past, Wyndham Earle, the insane genius who gave Cooper all of his training then brutally destroyed the most precious thing in his life, his lover Carolyn. Earle makes something of a mockery of Dale for almost 10 episodes. How could Earle have stayed in the woods for so damn long without any ability to find him? If he's so close to town that he can come in every day for hours at a time, how did no one at the police station think of searching all the local cabins in the woods and see if he's staying at one? Dale also makes multiple serious errors when dealing with Earle. Dale assumes that the whole chess game thing is a serious issue, but his former partner drops it on a dime when his real plans surface.
He has murdered innocents. He has engaged us in subterfuge and red herring. The fish I don't particularly care for.
Cooper, the ultimate detective, falls for this hook, line, and sinker for a long time. Earle begins to taunt Dale by playing a game of correspondence chess with him through the newspapers. Each time a piece is taken on the board, Earle murders a random transient he picks off the streets. The team wastes days on this chess nonsense. They also wait quite a while before recognizing Earle's true intentions, about using the power of the Black Lodge. Earle is able to rush ahead of them in his understanding of the Black Lodge and its mysteries. Wyndham is not really as impressive a villain as Bob, as I mentioned in my video about Wyndham Earle, and yet he's able to run rings around Cooper for a long time. Although in fairness, how Cooper could have discovered any of this faster is probably impossible. Still, Earle should not have been able to fool Dale for that long. In secret, Earle is working to usurp the powers of the Lodge and make them his own. Agent Cooper is surprisingly long in discovering this at episode 27. Up till then, they're mostly dancing to Earle's tune and making big assumptions. Wyndham even plants a listening device inside the sheriff's station without their knowledge for a long time, stealing vital info the cops have learned about the Lodge. Earle is set to kidnap a woman and terrify her enough to open the door to the Black Lodge, as fear will open the door. His queen, as he calls her, ends up being a woman that Agent Cooper has that great affection for. During this last stretch of the show, Cooper meets his final and most serious romantic partner, Annie Blackburn. Cooper has an instant attraction to her as she makes him act uncharacteristically cheery and unserious. Anna is Norma Jennings' sister, and she comes back to Twin Peaks after having spent a few years in a convent. Annie's age is a little unclear. Norma looks considerably older than her, especially because Heather Graham, the actress playing Annie, was only 21 at the time. Almost immediately they begin dating. Annie is intelligent, reserved, and somewhat broken inside because of a suicide attempt in her teens. She's presented as somewhat fragile and, as Cooper says, a somewhat childlike person. But she's also bright, able to converse with Agent Cooper about religion and philosophy, and quite a bit weird. Just like Cooper, she seems stuck a bit out of time and struggling to adjust in the modern world. They're a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, much of this doesn't come across well in her character. Most of this character info is told rather than shown. Heather Graham is a good actress and did a fine job, or at least a better one than here, in shows and movies a few years later when she was a bit older and more experienced. Here, though, she's not very good and seems to struggle with the dialogue and character. Possibly because it was cast so quickly and they had only a few episodes to let us get to know this character. It should also be mentioned that it could be considered somewhat condescending to Annie that Cooper is set to save her and that she is childlike and pure. Although, as I pointed out before, Cooper to some degree is also quite childish and silly at times with his exuberance for nature, trees, ducks, etc. We don't really spend enough time with Annie to really get to know her that well. She doesn't have a lot of personality or was not expressed well by the very young actress, so my opinion of her is rather neutral. But Cooper is far from neutral about his new love. He's even distracted from the case he's working on, at first, as his buddy Harry Truman points out. His mind is finally wandering away from work and onto private matters. Very odd for Cooper. Eventually, in the penultimate episode of the show, Cooper and Annie make love, also the first time I've seen Cooper do that on the show. Everyone else has had some kind of relationship except for Dale, and it's good to see him enjoying himself a bit. Agent Cooper is one of the greatest characters I've ever encountered in fiction. Not just in TV or film, but at any kind of creative work. Cooper is on my top 5 list. Maybe he's even number 1. I've always felt that the most important part of a character written for television is that he's likable. That doesn't mean he has to be bland or anodyne, it just means he has to be fun to be around. Every week you have to like seeing him, and Agent Cooper is damn likable, like a friend you go see every week. I love watching his thought process on the case. Unlike most TV detectives whom I find dull, Cooper is always fun to listen to. He's always got a bit of strangeness around the edges, a boyish wonder, and a great charm to him.
Forensics genius.
They're working for you, I wouldn't expect anything less.
But I gotta warn you, Albert's lacking in some of the social niceties.
Nobody's perfect.
Isn't that the truth? All right.
And he's just so engaging and interesting. If Agent Cooper were a real person, I would respect him tremendously and be eager to hear what he has to say. He's also something of an intellectual, having a serious interest in mysticism, Tibet, Eastern religions, and spirituality. Cooper is an incredibly deep person who thinks about the big things in life and the universe and nature and the environment with a whip-smart mind, engaging mannerisms, a stroke of weirdness, and best of all, he's cheerful and fun to watch and be around. I would love to have Cooper as a friend. Cooper also has his flaws, though. They're usually unstated or understated, but they are present. Cooper, as previously mentioned, is lawful good, a noble paladin ready to do good and stand up for what's right. Major Briggs is sort of like him in that way. But this attitude is also his Achilles' heel. Audrey says his one fault is that he's too perfect. That obsession with being totally upright and moral may be a massive character flaw in fighting the immoral, chaotic Bob. The spirits of the Black Lodge are creatures of chaos. To understand them requires a more chaotic or even insane mind. Perhaps that's really why Wyndham Earle was able to penetrate the secrets of the Lodge before Dale. Cooper lives, eats, and breathes order. He's overly formal, cheery, and even enjoys a kind of faux military lineup when leaving Twin Peaks and addressing each person there like an officer talking to a subordinate. Perhaps Dale's rigidly ordered mind was what prevented him from facing his ultimate test.
Of course, you couldn't help but take note of my emphatically traditional opening. I must say, your responding move was nothing if not reflective of your predilection for the tidy and fastidious. Hobgoblins, Dale. Consistency, predictability, giving rise to patterns. We both know only too well how these patterns leave you vulnerable to attack.
In the last episodes of the show, Annie Blackburn is kidnapped by Wyndham Earle. Earle has discovered that strong emotions like hate and love, the opposite of rationality, open the door to the Black Lodge. Rushing to save her, Agent Cooper is too late, and Annie is drawn into the darkness of the Lodge by the evil Wyndham. Desperately trying to prevent another lover from being killed in the same ghastly way, Cooper enters the world of spirits. Inside the origin point of these nightmare creatures, Dale is confronted with friendly and unfriendly faces from the past. Ghosts of the dead, weird dream creatures, his own violent past, and the most dangerous thing of all, his shadow self. Twin Peaks as a show takes place outside of time. It feels like it could take place in the 1940s or 50s. A time in America where talking about your feelings was not yet accepted. People buried their problems. It was the manly thing to do, to push everything down and forge ahead regardless. Yet those issues could fester inside us and transform into something neurotic or harmful. Without expressing or working through our pain and suffering, it could linger within us and hurt us when we least expect. Dale was stabbed by Wyndham years before the show begins. It was a terrible experience that almost killed him and left his life in shambles. He does not appear to have gotten over or worked through that tragic event. It was waiting there in his mind to weaken him in his darkest moment. Within the absurd world of the Lodge, his wound reappears and makes him unable to outrun his attackers. One of these creatures is Dale's shadow self, as Deputy Hawk calls it. A doppelganger of everyone, including Laura and Leland Palmer, seems to exist within the Black Lodge. This strange double finds Cooper and replaces him, leaving the original Dale trapped inside the lodge while his nightmare self lurks in Twin Peaks. Who exactly the shadow self is and how these creatures work in the real world is never made clear. How was this creature formed? Did Bob create it? Is there something like that lurking within every person waiting to get out? Until just recently, we were never able to find that out. I always assumed that the good Dale would be rescued from the lodge sometime in the third season, but the show was cancelled and we never saw it. Now, 25 years later, we're finally able to discover, I hope, what the heck happened. And it's been gnawing at the minds of a generation of viewers for decades now. What the heck happened to Cooper? Twin Peaks ends with the greatest cliffhanger of all time. The ultimate villain of the show is infested and seized control of our hero and leaves us with this haunting line.
Coop! Coop, are you okay? Coop!
How's Annie? How's Annie? How's Annie? How's Annie? How's Annie?
Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Michael. Please like this video if you liked it and leave a comment with what you thought about Special Agent Dale Cooper, my personal favorite character pretty much ever. I'm going to be starting a new series of videos reacting to each one of the new Twin Peaks series episodes after they're shown, so please subscribe to this channel if you want to see that. Bye-bye.